Hey folks, welcome to another video. Now, some of you have probably already seen the Windows 11 announcement, and oh boy, I like the improvements they made to Windows itself. Those seem to be like they're compelling. There are features there that we could talk about in another video that I think are going to benefit things like the gaming world tremendously with the new operating system. But the one part that I think just about everybody needs to pay attention to and worry about are the hardware requirements. You may have seen a kerfuffle about that online. I've certainly had my own kerfuffle about it with people on Twitter, and that is what has inspired me to make this presentation, because we need to make some sense out of this. So I've titled this Making Sense of Windows 11 Hardware Requirements. Now, remember when Microsoft said that Windows 10 is the last version of Windows you will ever need? Ha, 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 ha. Not anymore. So, what are the hardware requirements that we need to be worrying about? Now, there's a pretty big list of them, but I want to go over the ones that are going to affect everyone the most. And those are these. So, you need to have UEFI on your motherboard, so it needs to be fairly new. You need Secure Boot built into your board, which on fairly new systems has been a thing for a while. And here's the kicker: you need TPM version 2.0 on a physical TPM module in your motherboard, a firmware-based TPM called FTPM in your AMD CPU, or PTT, Platform Trust Technology, in your Intel CPU as the firmware-based TPM. Now, this has thrown a monkey wrench into the whole idea of upgrading to Windows 11. It makes the hardware requirements a lot more strict. The support for firmware-based TPM in CPUs is quite a bit newer than you would expect. Now, TPM has been in CPUs for at least the last 5 to 7 years, something like that. But TPM 2.0 isn't necessarily part of that. That's in much newer CPUs. So it's been a bit of a murky situation. At first, TPM version 2.0 was the hard limit. Then it was 1.2, and now it's back to 2.0. So as of when I'm making this video, 2.0 is the hard limit that your computer will need. And TPM is usually taken advantage of by things like BitLocker encryption and Windows Hello, and maybe some other features I'm not aware of. But either way, it needs to be there for Windows 11. Now let's take a look at the web page that Microsoft has here. So these are the more granular hardware requirements. So you need a 1 gigahertz processor that is 64-bit and is dual core or later. So 32-bit support is gone. So you're not going to be running this on 32-bit hardware, and the TPM thing would limit that anyway. You need 4 gigs of RAM because it's 64-bit. You need 64 gigabytes of storage to install this. You're going to need a graphics card that is DirectX capable or later with a built-in Windows 2.0 driver. So that should be anything that's fairly new. I have in this particular machine that I'm recording this video on, I have a Quadro P400, and in the gaming PC that needs to run Windows here, I have a 5700 XT, and that definitely runs DirectX 12. So recent graphics cards should be fine. You need UEFI firmware that is Secure Boot capable, so no more legacy BIOS. You need to TPM 2.0 built into either a module or your CPU. Looks like you need a 720p display now as well. And Home is going to require an internet connection and a Microsoft account to at least set the device up. So you're going to need internet to set your computer up if you're using Windows 11 Home Edition. Home Edition is its own discussion. They've really crippled it in a lot of ways. So prepare yourselves for that. So here is a list of the supported CPUs that we're looking at. The Verge has a nice list here. of all these CPUs. So for the Intel side, it's essentially Intel 8th gen or higher. So if you have Coffee Lake or Coffee Lake Refresh like I do, I have stuff that's 8th and 9th gen kicking around that is compatible with Windows 11. You should be fine. So 10th gen, 11th gen. It's pretty straightforward on the Intel side. Now on the AMD side, it's probably going to be a little murky because it doesn't support 1st gen Ryzen, if you can believe that, which came out in 2017 as I recall. It only supports 2nd gen and above, and that goes for Threadripper and Epic as well. Now here's where it gets murky. For the CPUs, it's 2000 and above. For some of the APUs they have released, such as the 2200G, those might not work because they use original Zen parts. They use the original Zen core, so they might not have the TPM support. If you have an APU, the 3000 series and above is compatible, so like a 3200G, a 3400G. And for the CPUs, your 2000 series and above will be capable. Now, Microsoft themselves has much more granular lists. They have these nice compatibility lists laid out for AMD, Intel, and Qualcomm ARM processors. So if we take a look at the AMD one, you'll notice that 3000G is in there. You have a bunch of Epic chips. 3200G, like I was saying, is compatible. 3200U in laptops. 3300U in laptops. So any APU-based machine, laptop or desktop, such as a 2500U or a 2200G, is not going to be compatible with Windows 11. Which is ridiculous, because I have an Acer laptop and an HP EliteBook that were made 3 and 2 years ago, respectively. And neither of them are compatible. So it's kind of feeling like the early 90s when hardware was going obsolete just about every 6 months. This is a moment where it's going to be a tight squeeze to upgrade to Windows 11. 5400U, 3200G, 3300U. 3600 is the processor in my gaming PC, so that's definitely compatible. And I think a lot of people bought these chips when they were new, so at least for gaming PCs and the like. But for OEM systems, it might be a different story. OEM's got this 4000 series of APU, and those are definitely supported because I believe those are Zen Plus or Zen 2. I forget which they are, but they're new enough that they should support FTPM with TPM 2.0 technology. Now, what's interesting is that you do have to worry about ARM, but very few. A lot of Snapdragon processors in here. So you do have to worry about ARM processors if you happen to be one of the few people that does have a Windows ARM tablet from Microsoft. There are more granular lists that you can take a look at, and I will post the link to this particular page in the description of the video if you want to take a look at it. So back to the slideshow we go. So how do you prepare your computer for Windows 11? Now, what you want to do first of all is check the BIOS on your computer, or the UEFI. You go into the BIOS menu and you check for secure boot support, and you check for and you make sure that FTPM or PTT, depending on whether you're AMD or Intel, are enabled in your UEFI. And I'm going to cut to a clip here showing what that looks like in the BIOS of both an AMD system and an Intel system, so that you get a good idea of what you're looking at. In this particular example, it's with an ASRock motherboard. It's going to vary. It's probably going to vary between different motherboards and BIOSes. So just be aware that results may vary, but the options that you're looking at, this will be a good example of how they're buried and where you go to look for them, and all those sorts of granular details. So on to the clip. Okay, this is the AMD example of how to turn FTPM on and what you need to look for in your BIOS. Some BIOSes will have this, some won't, but this is mostly relevant to custom-built PCs like mine here. This is a Ryzen 5 3600 based gaming PC. And of course, this processor is well within the the range to support FTPM. Now, as in the ASRock BIOS, I found that was a little bit buried, shall we say. So you would think that for TPM stuff you'd go to trusted computing, but not necessarily. Look at that. There you go. So it lets you choose the version in here. So there is stuff in security support, but this isn't where you turn it on. But as you can see, it will at least tell you what kind of device you have. And the vendor's AMD because it's on the CPU, it's firmware based. But where you want to go to switch that on and off is in CPU configuration. At least on some of these ASRock boards. They'll try to bury this stuff in the menus, but considering that firmware based TPM is typically on the CPU, you'd want to go to CPU configuration. And in the case of AMD, there is a switch to turn that on, the AMD FTPM switch. Now you can have it be the one on the CPU, and I think this is for a physical one, I'm not sure, but mine was disabled, so I turned it on to AMD CPU FTPM, and I was good to go for Windows 11. Now for Secure Boot, typically that's under something like the security section, like it is here. And I'm not really sure how to configure this. I don't know if it configures itself or you stick your Windows key in there and call it good. I'm not really sure how Windows 11 is going to affect this, whether you have to intervene or not. I would hope that Microsoft makes it so that when you install Windows 11, it'll just switch this on by itself from, user mode and call it good, but who knows what's going to happen. That's an example of what you need to do. You need to make sure you have Secure Boot on your system. This has it, so it might take some configuration, I'm not sure, but it's there, and that's important. That's one of the requirements. And you got to make sure that you have FTPM turned on, and make sure that the version of your TPM is new enough that it supports Windows 11, and this basically confirms that this computer can run it, and the tool I ran also confirms that I can run it, as you'll see by the pictures I've put up in this video. So that's the AMD side. Let's look at the Intel side of things. Here's the Intel example. This is an 1151 V2 system, I think, and it incorporates Coffee Lake and Coffee Lake Refresh CPUs. So this is 8th and 9th gen we're talking about, which is just new enough to support TPM 2.0 and the firmware on the CPU. And this is also an ASRock board, so I would think this is a good example of showing the similarity between the options. So let's go to CPU configuration, or just advanced in general. So we'll go to trusted computing. You want to I'm going to turn the security device on, even though it doesn't see it, but it might in the CPU configuration. So go to CPU configuration and see if I can turn PTT on or off in here. That's interesting. So that's SGX. That's not. That's interesting. Well, this motherboard does have Secure Boot. So it has that. It's new enough for that. Ah, found it. Okay, so on the Intel board, it makes a lot more sense. So PTT is Intel's firmware-based, CPU firmware-based TPM technology. So it's called Platform Trust Technology. And it's actually under the Security tab on the Intel side of things. So if I turn this on, and I save the changes and come back into the BIOS. So now we're back in the BIOS again, and if I go to Trusted Computing, it actually shows the firmware and all the details for the TPM on the built-in Intel chip. And it does appear to be firmware version that's new enough, and it's TPM 2.0 UEFI spec version. So it's definitely version 2 on the CPU. So that is how you configure your system TPM-wise to be prepared for Windows 11. You just have to turn the Intel Platform Trust Technology option on an 8th gen or later Intel system, and you should be good to go. Now, this may vary from system to system. Some BIOSes might have it, some might not for both AMD and Intel, but this is a basic idea of how to take care of it. Now, secure boot, again, I'm not sure about. That's either going to require intervention from the user, or it's going to require Windows 11 to configure this on whatever board. So, I might update that down in the description whenever that's figured out. Or if it does it by itself, you just don't have to worry about it. So, not sure what that's like yet, but just having it on your computer at all is a requirement, and if it meets that requirement, you are good to go for running Windows 11. Now, once you've verified that your motherboard, laptop, or your computer, whatever it is, have the secure boot support and the TPM 2.0 support, you want to run the compatibility check software. And Windows has its own, or Microsoft has its own called PC Health Check. And the link to that will be included in the description as well. And what you do is you run that. I'm sure if you want to find third-party software that does this, it's probably online, but I'm going to suggest the Microsoft one, just because it's official. Anyway, you run this tool, and you will get a result like this. This example you're seeing here is my gaming PC, as you can see by the name. On part of this, it shows how much RAM you have, how big your boot drive is, and I believe this shows you how old your install is. The computer itself is older than 2 years old, but I believe that the install is about a year old or so. So there you have it. That will show you how old your install is. And this is what you should see if FTPM is at version 2.0 and you have secure boot enabled. It should be able to work at that point. Now, if your computer is not capable of running Windows 11, what do you need to know? What's next? Well, the first thing you need to think about is Windows 10's support cycle. Now, you may have bought a laptop that's about 2 or 3 years old, like I have, that are not capable of running Windows 11. But keep in mind that if you want to still use Windows 10, you can. It has a very long support cycle. Windows 10 is going to be supported until October 14th, 2025. So in 2021, when I'm recording this, you have 4 more years of whatever computer is running Windows 10 and is not compatible with Windows 11 to keep using it. So you are not screwed. This doesn't mean that you have to go out and buy a new computer right now. You can use what you have until 2025 and not worry too much about it. And by then, you're probably going to upgrade anyway. Let's be honest. So what this means is that Windows 10 will have 10 years total of OS support, and that is pretty fantastic. So they're not leaving you high and dry, but after 2025, you're probably going to have to upgrade your computer if you want to use Windows 11 on it. In fact, you are going to have to upgrade your computer after 2025 if you want to use Windows 11 with it, and it is not compatible. So after 2025, what are your options then? I suppose you could keep running Windows 10 out of support. I don't recommend that, but some people do that with versions of Windows. These are the options that I think make the most sense. So what I'm going to do, at least on one of my machines that is not capable of upgrading, is just run Windows 10 on it until the support ends at the end of 2025 in October. There's no issue with that. That will work. That will be fine. You can get your work done. You can wait 4 years until you upgrade. You have that option. The other option is to use Linux on machines that don't meet the system requirements. If not being able to upgrade to Windows 11 bothers you that much that you don't want to use Windows on that particular computer at all, stick Linux on it. Stick Ubuntu on it, Manjaro, Debian, Fedora, whatever distro tickles your fancy, you could stick on that computer, because it currently does not have this strict TPM 2.0 requirement. The other thing you could do is buy or build a new computer before 2025 That way you are Windows 11 ready by then, and that might not be a bad idea because before too long we're going to have DDR5 RAM-based systems available, and probably by 2024, 2025, there's going to be fairly fast DDR5 that's worth buying for a new computer. So that's not a bad option either. You can just ride it out until you build a new computer and just not worry about it until then. What you could also do is, if you have first gen Ryzen on the AMD platform, for example, you could just buy a new CPU for that computer that's second or third gen and be ready for Windows 11. On the Intel side, you just basically need 8th gen or above, and that's that. There's no real big upgrade path as far as sockets go. And what I imagine businesses are probably going to do, and people that run servers and whatnot, are probably going to buy a separate TPM module for systems that support it. You can do that. And theoretically, if you have a TPM module now that's only 1.2, you could buy a 2.0 version TPM module and be just fine for Windows 11 on older machines that have a TPM header on them. I don't know what the compatibility is like with that, but I think that is probably going to be an option. With my systems personally, I'm going to have a few that are going to run Windows 10 up until 2025, and a few that are just going to be Linux-only machines from here on out, just because they don't meet the system requirements, such as Haswell-era Intel machines. That some do have TPM, but it's an older version of TPM. Those are going to be Linux machines to me from now on. This Acer laptop that's about 3 years old is going to run Windows 10 until about 2025. And as far as my desktops are concerned, my gaming PC, as you saw before, does meet the requirements, and that's an A320 first-gen Ryzen board. And I put a third-gen Ryzen chip in it, and it does meet the requirements. So it is good to go. So for those of you out there that needed a little clarity, I hope this has provided some for you and made this whole thing less of a mess to think about. And the information down the description should help with that as well. So I hope this was an informative video and made some sense out of this whole mess for everyone. And if you would like to engage on social media, those links are down below. And if you'd like to come into our Discord community, that link is also in the description. So that's it for this video. And have a good one, everybody. Ciao.